work. And that seems to be the big issue with court.
Hey there, my name's Ashley Church.
And I'm Erin West.
We were once newly promoted crime scene and latent print supervisors on mutual struggle buses as we both simultaneously tried to navigate through the challenges within our forensic units.
Now we run a business where we create tools and resources that we wish we had had to make these transitions easier. We like to talk about the experiences we've had in the forensic field, the good, the bad, and the ugly, in the hopes to create awareness around these issues and move the needle forward to create positive change in the forensic community.
So if you're a forensic professional, regardless of your years of experience, who's not afraid to dive into real, raw, and sometimes uncomfortable topics, you're in the right place.
This is the Forensics Unfiltered podcast.
Hey guys, and welcome back to Forensics Unfiltered. Today we're talking about a topic that seems to spark an immediate reaction anytime it comes up in forensic spaces or in any space in general, and that's artificial intelligence or AI. For some people, AI feels like a threat. For others, it's being marketed as a cure-all for staffing shortages, backlogs, burnout, you name it. And most of the conversations we hear tend to live at one of those extremes. But in our experience, especially in forensic work, extremes usually miss the point. New technology has always triggered fear in this field. We've seen it in software, instrumentation, automation, and digital tools long before anyone started using the term AI. And right now, we're already hearing a lot of what we think is misinformation, that AI will replace forensic analysts, that it can eliminate human judgment, or that adopting it automatically makes work faster, easier, and better. So in this episode, we're not here to hype up AI or to panic about it. We want to give a grounded, realistic conversation about what AI actually looks like in forensics today, where it can genuinely help, and where it's being overhyped, as well as what risks come with using tools we don't fully understand. Because the real question isn't whether AI is good or bad. The real question is, how do we use technology in a way that supports accuracy, ethics, and sustainability without quietly increasing risk or burnout? So today we're going to talk about AI as a tool and not an authority, as something that can support forensic professionals, not replace the work that they do. Let's get into it. Okay, Erin. So we have used AI probably for years now. How long has ChatGPT been available to us? I don't know.
I mean, it's probably been available to us for longer than we were aware of it and started utilizing it. But I think you and I probably regularly started using it. I think we tentatively started using it around 2 years ago. We were hesitant. We weren't really sure what it was. And then once we figured out how to use it, I use it daily at this point to just help with a variety of tasks. And I think you do as well.
Yeah, I think it was a learning curve to figure out how to make better prompts. So like when you first start with ChatGPT and you don't know what you're doing and you just ask it random stuff, that's when you get inaccurate outputs, or it's just not very good. Definitely over the years, learning how to use it, embrace it. I love it. Like you said, I use it all day, every day, not just for work, but we're doing projects in our house. So I ask it about spaces that I can improve. We've used it for vacations to kind of do research about what are some locations that are 4 hours driving distance that we can go that might have snow, stuff like that. But
yeah, I just recently used it over Christmas. I made 50 boxes of cookies to give out to my staff and my husband's staff, and I needed a dozen cookies, and I was making 6 different kinds of cookies. I put all of the recipes in there and asked it to calculate how much I needed which I can do that, but it would take me a minute to put all the ingredients out, So I dropped all the recipes in there and I was like, tell me how many pounds of sugar I need, pounds of flour I need, sticks of butter I need, whatever. And it just spit it right out at the end. It read my recipes, calculated out, 50 dozen cookies, and was like, this is what you need to buy. So you can
That's
use it for so many
amazing.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's literally seconds. So it has definitely not replaced our creativity and our brainstorming and our ideas. It just has made it so much more faster to execute. And
Mhm.
honestly, like some of the ideas that it does come up with, I'm like, wow, that would have taken me so long to brainstorm something like that. So it's been so helpful. But I have seen so many Facebook groups, people in person. I know at the forensic conferences that we went to last year, it's definitely a hot topic for AI. But why do you think like new, not just AI, but new technology in general always triggers fear in forensics?
I think it's just the unknown, right? People don't understand it. And then I think a lot of the thing that happens with new technology and forensics is just the fear of having to talk about those things in court. A lot of the technology and advancements that we make, people feel most uncomfortable about having to defend it in court. And even sometimes we adopt the technology and it's our attorneys that are uncomfortable
Mhm.
using it. So that becomes, a thing of trying to be like, okay, we've accepted it, we're comfortable with it. And also now we have to get them acceptable, comfortable with presenting this kind of stuff in court. I think that is part of what the fear is just that the application of it and the presentation of it, the defending of it later on in court.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And then maybe it's not even fear, like just thinking about, having our whole unit adopt this. Now we have to train our, staff, like deputies and sergeants on the road and stuff like that. Like, hey, we got this new technology, but now like we want you to give us a minute to be able to learn how to use it. It's definitely going to add some time on the scenes or to our cases and stuff like that, and then going through the process of getting it adopted by the attorneys too. Some people may not think like, is this new technology even worth it? Even worth that effort and time? So it may not be even fear. It could just be like, ugh, like I just don't want to go through all of the hoops, that you
Yeah.
have to jump. So I know that we probably don't even know or really understand AI's capabilities and use it to its full potential. But what are some of the things that you have heard, like misinformation that we're already hearing about AI?
Well, I think one of the things that we keep hearing over and over again at conferences and stuff related to forensics and we hear it a lot with like educators and stuff like that too, is that using AI is cheating, right?
Yes.
Basically using this to help you with your work, help you write papers, help you do things like that is cheating. And I won't lie, I was one of those people in the beginning that very much felt that way as well. Like I felt like it was skipping all of the things that I had to do to get from here to there, like, and I do believe that we still have to develop those skills. I think that we as professionals, we do need to know how to write and, put together coherent thoughts and stuff like that without the support of AI. However, caveat, the kids these days are growing up with this. This is going to exist for them. There's no getting rid of it, right? We have it, it's here. We have to learn to adapt to having it here. And Ashley brought up at the Foster and Freeman conference, I thought it was a really great example. And you can think of her example in like so many different ways, but there were people there arguing that you shouldn't do it, you should have to do everything like the old school way, you shouldn't be using AI. And Ashley brought up the calculator and she said something along the lines of like everybody was hard pressed that you had to know all of your mathematics, because in what world would you ever have a calculator with you, when calculators first came out. And so everyone was very hard pressed on like, you have to be able to do all of this math by yourself because you're never going to have a calculator. And now everyone has a calculator. And if you're doing a really complex math problem, Could you sit there and do your long division and multiplication and whatever? You could, but not a single one of us does. Not a single one of us does. We take the shortcut to go right to the calculator, and none of us think anything about that. Because really, in your mind, you're like, good God, why would I do that on a piece of paper? It takes me forever, you know? And you can think about the stuff that we use in our career. There's a ton of stuff like that, like a computer, for example. Back in the day, we used to handwrite reports. Good God, can you imagine handwriting a report right now? And I'm sure that when the word processor and the computer came out, that people were like, oh my God, how are you going to use a computer? Like, that's just cheating. You know, we should be handwriting it for whatever reason. And now we couldn't even imagine it. Like, we could not even imagine sitting down and handwriting a 30-page homicide report. Absolutely not. I have no interest in doing that, you know? So we've adopted a lot of tools along the way where there's been a lot of resistance. It is helping us be faster, more efficient with our work. And once we adopt that and get used to it, we can't even think of going back the other way. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen with AI is that this is another new tool that people are like, oh my God, we can't use that. Like, we do have to do all of this on our own. And 10 years from now, we'll be like, oh my God, where were we without it? You know, I think
Yeah.
there's a lot of applications for it.
Absolutely. I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, the other things that I could think of that people, had the mindset of, this is cheating is probably Google. And that's a
Sure.
perfect example where it's like the outputs aren't always great. You can get information from a blog and it could be completely inaccurate. So people are like, the real way to do it, that where you're not cheating, is to go to the library. And back then you had to like search in a filing cabinet to go find where the books were and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I do think that this technology is going to be amazing if we harness it and teach people how to use it the proper way. But like you said, it's not going away. It's here to
No,
stay. So we
it's
better
definitely not going away. And I
figure
do
it
think
out.
Google's a great example. You know, I am old enough that we did not have a computer in my home growing up until I was like a teenager. Okay. Some of you listening are probably like, OMG, right? We had dial-up internet. We got a computer, we had dial-up internet. Before that, if I had to look up the answer to something, my parents purchased a set of encyclopedias, and I used to have to go look them up in the encyclopedia. Not only does that take a lot of time, they were old. They weren't buying them every year, right? So,
Yep.
like, yes, you can get incorrect information out of Google. You can get incorrect information out of AI. You can get incorrect information out of a 20-year-old textbook, which many of us have in our laboratories, right? So, like, we got to take it all with a grain of salt when we're using these tools and know that they're there to help us be more efficient, get more work done, all of that stuff. But we do have to quality check what the output is from those things. They're not going to replace us doing our job entirely. You know, they're going to assist us. They can assist us to do our job better and faster.
So on that same topic of what can AI assist us with, where do we see AI already embedded in forensic workflows, maybe without people even realizing it? Let's start there.
Before we jump back in, I want to tell you a quick story that I think you will relate to. In one of our forensic labs, we had this latent print processing flowchart just hanging on the wall. It was old and crusty. Who knows how long it had been there? And it was that sad brown and beige color. You know the one I'm talking about because somehow every forensic lab seems to have this one processing flowchart. Not only was it unpleasant to look at, it really wasn't that easy to follow. And honestly, most people didn't use it at all. It just blended into the background of the lab wall and became white noise. You forgot it was even there. And then on the rare occasion someone would actually reference it, it would suggest a reagent or a technique we hadn't used in a while. So now you're standing there scratching your head thinking, okay, how exactly do we apply this again? This usually meant walking back to our desk, digging through an SOP, or reading an SDS sheet. And let's be honest, written instructions are not always helpful in the moment. A video would have been so much better. That exact frustration is why we created the comprehensive latent print processing flowchart poster, now updated for 2026. This poster is huge. It's 48 by 36 inches and combines the full processing workflows for the most common surface types into one clear, modern reference. And can I tell you about the coolest feature of this flowchart and what makes it interactive? The flowchart includes QR codes, and when you scan that QR code, it links you directly to a step-by-step video demonstration. Boom! While you're standing right there in front of the flowchart, you can get a quick refresher on reagents and techniques that you haven't used in a while. For the 2026 update, we've added a QR-linked video for small particle reagent. We've also incorporated VMD steps for wet, non-porous, and greasy surfaces. And we've also added acid violet 17 for bloody surface processing. So what's on your wall reflects current techniques and best practices used in forensic labs today. Now, if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast episode, you may not be able to see the flowchart, so you'll just have to trust me or click the link below to see for yourself. But we've intentionally designed this flowchart to be something you actually look at, use, and trust. Head to gapsciencemerch.com, that's gapsciencemerch.com, to order the 2026 updated version of the comprehensive latent print processing flowchart poster and turn that wall space into something that truly supports your work. All right, back to the episode.
Where do we see AI already embedded in forensic workflows, maybe without people even realizing it? Let's start there.
I think we're used to some of our tools that we use already using algorithms, right? We refer to the algorithms, things like APHIS. Now, many people don't understand fully how APHIS works and couldn't sit down on the stand and explain how APHIS works or how your Pharaoh works or how any of those things work. There's technology in there that we don't understand, but we're perfectly capable of using it and getting a good output, right? So we already have some of those kinds of systems in place where they're using algorithms and things to do searches for us, and they're searching millions and millions of things and outputting results for us. When back in the day, a human had to do that by hand, right? A human was going through all the fingerprint card files and doing that by hand. And I'm sure people were scandalized when the first APHIS came out and it was just going to do it for us, you know? But still, there's a human there that's kind of checking that component of it. I am one of the administrators of our body-worn camera system. We use Axon, and I think that this is probably where we'll see it come into forensics maybe first. But Axon has some AI capabilities where the AI will listen to the recording and generate a report for that officer. So instead of the officer having to come back to the office and sit down and actually physically type out their report, the report is generated based off of the recording from the call and all the information that happened on the call. Now, the officer still has to go through that report and make sure it's all accurate and make their edits and stuff like that. And that takes time. But if you think about for a law enforcement agency, if you could take hundreds of officers and they would not have to write reports anymore, and you could turn them around faster and get them back out on the road, how much safer you could make your community, how much more bang you could get for your buck. And then also the consistency of report writing. You know, you think like we are at a department where we have hundreds of officers who are writing the full breadth of the spectrum, right? We have some that are excellent report writers, some that are horrible report writers, and having something like that makes the whole department's reports very consistent, very timely. Nobody's missing their deadlines. It's generating reports as soon as the call is completed. And I think something like that could be wonderful for forensics. You know, we hear crime scene departments all the time talk about how they have people that are horrible report writers and everybody's reports are drastically different.
You know, they take forever to write them.
They take forever. Yeah.
Like, homicide reports that are over a year old that they still haven't written. Like, come on.
Yeah. They take forever. a lot of us already do this, right? A lot of templates and drop downs and stuff like that that we're creating in our reports to try to make them consistent from person to person. But something like this could help you generate reports more rapidly. It would be consistent across all of your members. And I don't think that's a crazy thing to use it for, something like that.
Yeah, I think so too. I know we went to the IDEMIA conference the past couple of years. They've already been talking about AI. In fact, I think a lot of AI is already infused into a lot of the software. So
Mhm.
if you're using the facial recognition systems from IDEMIA, if you're using any of the AFIS systems from IDEMIA or anything like that, like guys, it's our AI has already been incorporated in there to help with those outputs and those results and to make it more accurate and more efficient and stuff like that. But I feel like if you think of any of the software that people are using right now, I would not be surprised if a lot of it has AI components, like the limb systems, like those I'm sure are going to have AI components to it to
Oh,
send automatic reminders of, this needs to be tested or this hasn't come back from the lab yet, and, send automatic reminders to whoever needs to be notified about it. I'm sure a lot of the court software, like, issuing subpoenas and stuff like that's got to be probably AI. A lot of the emails, we use Gmail and it's already like whenever you have a email come in, it's already like AI has already written a response for you if you choose to use that or
yeah.
any form of that and adapt it to whatever you want to say in your emails. But stuff like that, like I think that is incredible. So useful and so efficient. And like you said, it
Yeah.
makes
Well,
maintains a lot more consistency.
yeah. And I think people are concerned about putting, private law enforcement information out into the world. But there are closed systems, right? Where you can get a closed system, like your law enforcement agency could get a closed system for your department where you guys could put all kinds of data in there and the only data it's accessing is what you've given it, right? So it's not putting things out into the world. But like one of the examples up at one of the conferences using AI, like say for example, training, say that you have a closed system and you feed it your entire training program, right? You feed it your training program, your PowerPoints, you teach it all of the things that a trainee needs to learn, you feed it all of your SOPs and things like that. And then when someone has a question, it could be anyone on your staff. If someone has a question about how do I do this? How do I use this piece of equipment? How do I use whatever? They can go to that AI system and be like, hey, I need a refresher on the steps of how to set up the Pharaoh. And instead of that consuming a human's time or a supervisor's time, a lot of times those questions get fielded to the supervisor. The AI could help them sort through hundreds and hundreds of documents to find the answer to things. Like I recently went to a cold case webinar and they were using AI to listen to all of the old recordings and read all the old reports and it would connect the dots for them. So it would say like, hey, this person's name was mentioned in this recording, and this recording at this time, instead of a human being having to listen to 80 hours, 100 hours of old recordings, reading through old crappy files and old crappy reports, trying to connect dots together. Like it would put timelines together and it just streamlines the process. It's not that you're not doing the work. You're still there in there doing the work, but why would you spend 100 hours doing the work? If it could do it for you in 30 minutes, you could take that information and like continue on.
It makes me think of the court reporters too. Like
Yeah,
there's a whole human in there like transcribing everything. And I'm sure there's like, there's things that they messed up or like don't, because people talk fast,
sure.
they don't get super accurate. So like even having AI doing the transcriptions and stuff like that, like it could be
Yeah.
a lot more helpful and
And
stuff.
I will say, like, and we may get into this more, but as a supervisor now, I use AI regularly. And two of the things I used it for this week, one that I really love to use it for is evals. I really want to give people a fresh eval every year. And sometimes it's
And
hard
you
when you
should.
have, yeah,
You shouldn't
sometimes it's
copy paste
hard.
from the
But I
last
mean,
year,
I
okay?
don't mean like, I mean like fresh content. Like, let's say they scored exactly the same in the category as they did last year. Well, I'm not going to copy what I wrote last year and paste it in again. I want to give them fresh information, right? I've also found that when I have something negative to say about somebody, that can be very difficult to write in a way that is constructive, right? So I kind of use it almost as a brain dump. So I'll say, like, here's the category, here's what scores equal, the definitions, and then I'll brain dump, like, these are all the positive things I saw. It will pop it together for their performance in that category, and it gives them something, some fresh feedback for the year. So I really love that. And one of the other things I used it for just this past week is budget justifications, right? And I am having to spend a lot of time writing out justifications for why we want this piece of equipment and why we want more people and all of that. And I will type in all of the pros and cons. I'll say, like, these are all of the pros of having this piece of equipment. These are all the cons that'll come if I don't get this piece of equipment, how it'll impact the department. And it puts it into this like really cohesive justification statement for my chain of command where it says, like, it just puts everything out. Now, can I write those? Yes. Have I written those in the past? Also, yes. Does it take me forever? Yes. Like, I'm still doing that work. I'm still inputting all of that data. I'm still the one with the thought process of why we need this, why it's important. It doesn't know any of that, right? I'm still doing all of that work. All it's doing is taking it and putting it into like a really cohesive, compelling thought that I can send to my chain of command. So I use it for things like that at work all the time.
Yeah, let's dive into this further. And then we'll talk about like risks and limitations and ethic issues and stuff like that. But let's talk about, what this could look like in a day to day. Something that I also think about as far as like supervision is concerned is conflict resolution, or if you have a problem employee, if
Yep.
you need to write a PIP, a
Yep.
performance improvement plan or something like that. I think AI is fantastic. And even though it's not like an emotional being, right? You can input like, these are the two employees, these are their personalities. If you've taken our forensic supervision course or forensic FTO course, we talk a lot about the different personality types. So
Yep.
if you know your employee's personality type, or employees that maybe have conflict with each other, it will help you be able to approach each one of them individually in the way that they're going to best receive, like, some bad news or some ways to improve and stuff like that. So I think that is also an incredible resource. And if you have to draft up, like I said, in a performance improvement plan, if you want to see if your performance improvement plan is aligning with your policies and procedures that you have written in place, or if they violate any policies and procedures, it can be able to identify exactly what the issues are, how to improve it, and how to verbalize that in whatever documentation that's required from your agency.
Yeah, I've definitely used it for that. I've used it for challenging conversations that I know I'm walking into. So it isn't even necessarily conflict between two employees. It's maybe a difficult conversation that I have to have with an employee or that I have to have with another supervisor about performance or something like that. And I can put information in there about, like, this is the conversation I need to have. This is the reaction that I'm expecting. I want it to stay calm and professional. This is the goal that I'm trying to get to at the end of this conversation. And it'll give you some good ideas of how to navigate those circumstances. I've even had two where talking about like performance improvement plans and stuff like that, I've had it happen too with employees that are on something like that. And when they're going through that period of time, they are reacting to it poorly or, becoming like passive aggressive or like things like that are starting to happen. Or I have my own biases and I've interpreted what they're doing in, under my own lens, and then I can put that information into an AI and say, like, hey, this was the feedback that I gave them. This is the response that they're having. And even sometimes it has been like, well, you might not be interpreting that the same way as what they're intended. And that helps me be a little more unbiased towards those situations. Has helped me kind of open my mind a little bit to those kinds of things as well.
Yeah. And I've used that in personal life too. So highly
Mhm.
recommend for those situations. Now, let's, for the people that are maybe not in a supervisory role just yet, let's talk about the potential that AI has for casework because we were at the Facts 25 conference last year by Foster and Freeman, and they were talking about the things that they are thinking of as far as like AI is concerned with just the alternate light sources. And I thought it was incredible. So I know I've been out of the field for a little bit, but whenever I would use an alternate light source for especially like a big surface, so if you've done like a whole bed sheet and you're looking for semen, that can take so long, especially the handheld light sources that we have. The output was not great. So we're like, very close proximity, maybe like, 6 to 12 inches away from the bed sheet and like just kind of scanning it. And it's hot and it would take a while. And they were talking about using their alternate light sources. It would identify like, hey, this section right here is likely semen. And then obviously the analyst would have to go behind and like do the presumptive test or the confirmatory test and stuff like that. But if it can scan an entire like freaking surface, like a bed sheet and something big like that, and it can point out like the areas that are most likely probative type evidence, I think that's amazing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there'll probably be people listening to that who will say, like, well, the forensic analysts like should know. We shouldn't have a machine that is telling us the answers. Like the forensic analysts should know, and they should know. But I think we all know that there's many departments across the country that are actively processing crime scenes and actively doing forensic casework without that knowledge at all. So if we as a country are not going to stop that from happening, if we're going to continue to allow forensic professionals to do forensic work across the country, not fully understanding why they're doing it or what they're doing, then I think tools like this would definitely benefit the citizens as a whole,
Yeah.
in a nutshell. So, and that was one of the things that came up at that conference too, is like you can't let it run wild. You still have to understand why you're doing what you're doing, and you have to double check that it's giving you the results that you expected. Being the scientist doesn't go away, right? But I do think having tools like this would really help with some of those areas where there isn't a lot of knowledge and people really are still practicing forensics, even though they're not fully understanding, all the reasons
We've
behind
seen the
what
abysmal
they're
training
doing.
programs or lack thereof. So it would
Yeah.
not surprise me if they're like, here's a light source, good luck. Like, like I said, so the way I can see that happening and also maintaining ethics is like the first search, the first scan is done by AI and it points out the areas that it thinks is most likely and it can give you a percentage or whatever. Most likely like a semen stain or a blood stain and stuff like that. You go behind, you check those areas out, confirm yes or no, and then you as the analyst, you go back and do like a second check to confirm like did it miss anything. But I don't know. Anything else that you could think of that like AI would be such an incredible like searching tool or like a component to anybody else's casework?
I mean, I think there's so many places we're going to see it pop up, honestly. I think report writing will be a huge one. That would be a huge one for many departments. I think we're going to automatically see it incorporated into a lot of the technology that we use, whether we realize it's there or not. So a lot of the equipment, a lot of the technology we're using is just automatically going to have it. We're not even going to really know that it's there. There's so many potential applications for it, I really think. It's going to be wild to see what happens in the next couple of years.
Okay, so obviously in some of this casework, there is going to be things where there should be human judgment. It's going to remain non-negotiable. And I think it's important as we discuss this, knowing that this is coming. It's already here, guys. It's already here. So like your agency needs to be proactive and get ahead of like, what do we want to put into our policy where human judgment is absolutely non-negotiable in X, Y, and Z. So I imagine maybe not searching for rich detail, but certainly making the call of whether or not, this rich detail, I'm probably going to use the wrong terms, but like matches an individual. That's always going to be remained human judgment, no matter what.
And that's something we're already used to, right? So the system returns results for us, and then we double check the system. So kind of what Ashley was talking about earlier about using it as a screening tool, like that really is what APHIS is for us, right? It's a screening tool. So it searches millions and millions of prints, and then it spits back out like, well, this is what I thought was best. And then a human looks at it and is like, nah, or yeah, that looks pretty good, And that speeds up the process significantly, very significantly, right? So if we could use these tools and technology and have it do screening like that, and then we circle behind and double check it, I mean, if it would take us 45 minutes to search an entire sheet, but a tool like that could take a minute, and then it would say like, hey, look at these areas. I think these areas are semen or whatever. That just speeds up your process significantly. So I think we'll just see a lot of those things where it's moving us faster, it's making us more efficient, but someone else, someone's still going to have to come behind and double check it. It's like many of the other systems, garbage in is garbage out, right? So if you have an internal AI system that you're using, if you feed it crap, it's going to spit out crap, right? So we're going to have to spend a lot of time making sure that we are feeding good information into, especially if you're doing like closed systems for your department, that you are feeding good information in there. You're keeping it updated as you change your training program, change your SOPs, change your technology, feeding all of that in there for it to give you good results. But if you're doing that, I think it could really be an incredible tool for most departments.
And kind of exploring this a little bit more in regards to training, because we know most agencies out there, your training programs are not good.
Yeah.
And we were in that same boat too. And let me tell you, Aaron and I hand jammed our training programs, and it would have been so much easier, so much faster, so much less effort from us if we had some AI tools to develop our training programs. But I want to kind of talk about how might AI change how we train new people coming in.
Oh, gosh. That's like a huge area of potential, right? So I think you could feed entire training programs, exercises, activities, all of that into an AI, and a lot of training could become very self-paced and also not one-sided, right? So these AI systems, like many of them can communicate back to you. So for example, here's a great example. Our comm center just got an AI system where the trainers can feed in different types of calls and different callers. Some of the callers are upset, some of them are agitated, some of them call and scream at the comm center people. And so when they're in training, they get to practice with this AI. And this AI, based on if they do their procedures correctly, if they respond correctly, it will either ramp up the call or they'll de-escalate the call or whatever. And then at the end, it grades them on how they performed on that call. So a human used to have to do that with them, right? Sit there with them and fake these calls. And now they could put an unlimited number of calls in there, and they could have their people practice taking calls from all different kinds of cases, all different kinds of people, and practice doing the whole process, without using the energy of a physical human to sit there and do that. And they're still getting great practice that they're going to use every day as part of their job. When I heard that we had that system, I asked if we could use it because we have the same thing happen in our evidence unit, and I oversee evidence. So evidence does a lot of customer service. We have people calling all the time that are pissed because we have their stuff and they should never have been arrested. And I don't even know why this was taken. And they get yelled at and like all of this stuff. So we have a whole customer service module in the training program where we practice taking phone calls, and the trainer actually sits there with them and goes through a variety of calls. There's certain information they're not allowed to give out over the phone, like all of that kind of stuff. All of that could be replaced with this AI system that we already have at Comm Center. And we're going to do that. We're going to feed all the information. We've already made the activities. We're going to feed it all into the AI, tell them what they're allowed to answer, what they're not allowed to answer. And we're going to have them yell at them, cry at them, like whatever, and they can practice all that with that system. And do I think that they need an actual human being to do that with them? I don't, I think that they could do all those activities with the AI. And then once they've had all that practice, then they can go to like taking real phone calls with a person sitting with them and working through the things with them. But there's so many things like that where we could use something like this for that would give you a person back to do regular work.
Yeah, I love that. I
Yeah.
can definitely see that also being helpful, even like in a crime scene aspect where, the officer calls or the detective calls, you have to get information,
Yeah.
which is like so basic. But I think it's usually, oh, this isn't important. Like we'll just learn this later. So they don't get that practice. But I think it kind of helps them go through the motions without having to have a physical human being practice those with them. So I think that's a great. Of course, in my perspective too, I think your training programs could be improved so incredibly much with the help of AI, developing all of, if you don't have like a software, like the AI software, like Erin's talking about, AI can help you basically develop anything and everything in your training program, from a manual to PowerPoint slides to presentations. Honestly, like the AI videos are incredible now. So if you want to have a lesson where you don't maybe it's out of your element to sit there and record and edit, and that takes a lot of time, like you can feed all of the information that you want the AI person to say, and they will develop this video, and it will be incredible to be able to have training material at your fingertips any moment that you need it. Like, say you have to entertain or, have the trainee kind of learn on their own for a bit, you can pull something out like that at a moment's notice, and AI can help you develop those things. Obviously, like in any of your curriculum, I see it being super helpful if you have a trainee struggling and you can tell AI, this is exactly where they're struggling, and this is our current curriculum. How can we deliver this in a better way? How can we identify what the root cause is to their struggles? I can see that being also very, very helpful. Just so many different applications that you can use AI. And then I've also seen too, where this is kind of an asterisk, a caveat, like Erin said, garbage in, garbage out. But there are people training AI bots as well. So you can spit all of your SOPs, your policies and procedures, the way you do things, and train an AI bot so that at any moment, if your trainee has a question about anything that you guys do in your units, they don't have to keep constantly bugging the trainer with these little questions over and over and over again. Obviously, you want to make sure that the output that the AI bot is giving them is accurate. So again, you'll have to test it and train it. But that would be so helpful for trainers not to have to constantly be interrupted all the time with just the really silly questions,
Yeah. And there's a million different, like, I don't even know everything that's out there. There's so many different things that you can do with AI right now. But some of our detectives last week were using, and I don't remember what it was called, but it basically turns what you put into it into a podcast. And so they had given the AI their stats for the past year, and it turned all of their stats into a podcast. And it was hilarious. It was like, Detective so and so was the bomb.com. And like, oh my gosh, did you see his whatever? It was so funny. And like thinking about training programs, a lot of it's so dry, it's so dry. Like we
Yes.
have them sit and do readings and things like that. But think if you could feed some of the readings into the AI and it turned it into a fun podcast for them to listen to. Like, think of how, well, even just for us, think of how dry some of the scientific articles are. Like, for example, so a brand new scientific article comes out and we're like, okay, it's 15 pages, we want our staff to read it so they're up to date on the new information, and if they have to testify to it in court, like whatever. Think about if you could feed that article into that and they could listen to it as a fun podcast with two people talking back and forth, how much more likely it would be to stick in their mind the details about that article as opposed to just like sitting down in the middle of a workday and like trying to read a 15-page scientific article, Like there's so many opportunities like that for us to engage our team and like help with the learning of our team with these kinds of tools. Like it was so funny. I really feel like if we did stuff like that, like I would listen to a whole scientific article that way with two people just being like, "Damn, did you see what they did?" It was hilarious. So, I think there's a lot of opportunities there for things we can do to like, beef up our training program and support our staff really with AI.
Yes. Okay. So obviously, if you could tell from our outlook on AI, for us, we see the opportunities and we think it's a very positive future. But let's talk about some of the risks or limitations or ethical issues that a lot of people are concerned about for good reason. So, first, how do you think incorporating things like AI is going to complicate testimony in the courtroom?
I think the part that will be complicated for testimony is that people don't understand how it functions. And especially if it's like open systems that we're dumping things into, I think the court systems will have a big problem with that. But people aren't really going to be able to explain how the AI systems that they're using work. And that seems to be the big issue with court. But caveat for that, we use a lot of systems in our forensic work that we don't understand how they work. I mean, I use a computer and a cell phone every day. I'm totally proficient in using a computer and a cell phone, but if you put me on the stand and ask me how it functioned or how it got me that answer that I typed in there, I most certainly could not explain that to you. So we have a lot of tools like that. We have a lot of drones and ALS and like all of these different things that we use to help us do our work that we could not necessarily explain how the technology works. So it's probably likely that some company will create some kind of closed system that we could purchase as a law enforcement agency. And then if we use that closed system, it'd probably be one of those things where we could call that company in to testify if they really wanted to get into the weeds of how that system worked. But it would be a tool that we would become proficient in using because we use it every day, even though we don't necessarily know all the inner workings of it. But I think that's always the challenge, is like being able to explain how it's actually functioning to get you the results.
Yeah, I like that. And I think this is all the more reason if you're going to, again, incorporate anything. It doesn't have to be AI, it could be a new instrument, a new tool. I think validation studies are going to be like, you've got to make sure that you validate anything that you're incorporating. So, like I mentioned, that AI bot, that's going to answer questions for your trainee. Are you constantly testing it? Are you asking it questions? And is it giving you the output that you're expecting? Or is it like something way off topic or outlandish or inaccurate? Do you think there are going to be any bias risks that are going to exist using AI tools?
I mean, I think the opportunity is there for sure because what you feed into it is what you will get out of it, right? So there's a lot of opportunity for bias, especially, I think probably even more so in a closed system, right? Because you're just feeding it your own stuff. So if you're inserting your own biases in there, then that's what it's going to kick back out too. So I do think there's opportunity for that, especially if it's a human feeding information into that, and we do have natural biases, I think we'll have to be very conscious of that for sure.
Yeah. I think in a way, some of the way that we use AI kind of eliminates or reduces some of our personal bias, because it's just a robot. So ChatGPT is something that we use all of the time. And I do think after using it for so long, it does try to stroke your ego a bit,
For
so
sure.
there is some bias that's inserted into some of these AI technologies. So ChatGPT is just one, but it would be like, oh, that's a fantastic idea, Ashley. Oh my God, you're so smart, stuff like that. So
Yeah. And
but
you can, I know that there's people that do ask it not to do that, like they intentionally ask it to play devil's advocate, and then of course it will do that. So yeah, there is all of that as well.
yeah.
But you can
So
be
like I'm
very
thinking like
specific.
report writing stuff, or if you're using it to write daily observation reports, if you're using it to write performance evaluations and stuff like that, I think, like you said, having it remain unbiased, I think is going to be where you want to train it.
For sure.
Yeah. As far as limitations go, now I see a lot of limitations right now. Now AI is getting smarter by the day, but the AI tools that we personally use, I do see some of the limitations as far as the scientific accuracy of it. So we use AI all the time in our business whenever we're brainstorming and we're generating ideas and stuff like that. So we've used it for blood stain pattern analysis. We've used it for latent print processing. A lot of that material, we've used it for that as well. And I see a lot of the time that I will have to go back and like comb through and make sure that the output that it has is actually scientifically sound. And a lot of times it's definitely missing the mark when it comes to some of the scientific jargon.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about a tool like ChatGPT, you put something in and it's basically searching the internet for that information, right? So it's combing everything. It's scooping up everything, whether that's information is right or wrong. And so you do have to go behind and double check that the data you received is correct, But I think Ashley and I, and this is the difference, I think, between the generations is, they've done studies on how the older generation is using ChatGPT versus how the younger generation is using AI and ChatGPT, things like that. And the older generations are using it more as like a super powered Google, right? So we are
Yeah.
using it to rapidly search information for us, and it does make us more efficient. It cuts down all that time. Like we would go out and find that information on our own in the past, but we're asking it to search the internet for this information more rapidly. And then they're saying that the younger generation is really using it not as a Google, but using it more to help them make decisions. They're running all of their decisions through it. When Ashley and I are running information through it, we're not asking it to make the decision for us or to tell us what decision to make. Oftentimes, we've already made the decision of what we want to do or what we're going to do, and we're asking it to help us flesh out our ideas, polish up our ideas, find information to bolster our ideas. This is our idea. Can you help us, build out a lesson plan around this idea? Like things like that. Whereas the younger generation is using it more of like, should I make this decision or not? And that is going to be a big challenge for all workplaces, right? So if someone's coming into forensics and they're using a tool, an AI tool to help them know if they've made the right decision or not, that's going to be a heavy lift on us as supervisors to make sure that they are confident enough in their own knowledge and skills that they can make the decision on their own without running it through the system, because we're the ones that are supposed to double check the system, right? To make sure it gave us the correct result. So we're really going to have to do a lot to make sure our people are trained properly and confident in making their own decisions, and reinforcing that that's a tool that we need to double check, not that we run everything through it so it spits out the answer for us, kind of thing.
So interesting. I hadn't heard about that article that you're referencing. That's definitely not, I guess we're old because that's definitely not how I use ChatGPT.
No. I'll see if I can find it. Maybe we can include it in the show notes because I was talking to my husband about it and he was like, "Isn't that so interesting that in like 40 years the person that's the president of the United States is going to be asking ChatGPT if they should make a decision or not?"
Should
Like,
we go to war? Like,
yeah, you know.
based off of all of the data I've given you, should we go to war?
Yes, yes. And so, but they've grown up with it and they're using it, they're communicating with it like it is their own, almost like it's their best friend, their therapist, like all of these things, they're really running these like complex life decisions and these situations that they have through it to give them feedback, to help them analyze themselves, analyze people in their lives, things like that. Should I buy this thing? Should I make this decision? Should I go to this school? Like all of that kind of stuff. And then waiting for it to respond before they make decisions. So I do think that is a stark difference between how the different generations are using it. But that is what's happening, right? So that is what's going to be coming into our workforce is people that grew up with AI and that are using it in that manner. So we're going to have to do some retraining or adjusting in our workspaces to accommodate that, to know that that is the thought process and work around that.
Yeah. So while we're on this as well, let's talk about the ethical issues that we have. Some people have raised concerns about, or we've seen ourselves.
I keep hearing too, but I don't know enough information about this to actually talk about it. But I keep hearing too that like people are like boycotting companies that use AI. And I'm not really sure why, I
The
think
things that
it's,
I have seen as far as like why someone would boycott AI, some of it has to do with if you're using AI to generate images or videos or stuff like that.
yeah, I have seen that art. I've also seen something about like AI being not environmentally friendly.
Yes, that
Um,
was the other thing that people
yeah,
usually kind of the argument that they would bring up
yeah.
as well is the environmental impacts of using AI.
What is the environmental impact?
I guess the big system that it uses generates even more energy, I think is what
Okay.
it is. But I have heard where it was a concern during like the first iteration of AI. It was using a crap load of energy.
Yeah,
But now it has obviously with AI, everything, it learns and gets better and gets more efficient.
yeah.
So they're seeing actually a downward trend as far as what they were expecting the impact to be.
Okay.
But
I
yeah.
don't know. I don't know.
Would you
I'm
even
sure.
think it's unethical for if forensics, were to use body worn camera for like AI to generate the report for them? Do you think that's ethical?
I don't see what the issue with it would be, honestly. It wouldn't surprise me if forensic professionals do have to start wearing body worn cameras in the coming years. I think that there's more and more and more of an expectation of transparency. So it wouldn't surprise me in the least if forensic professionals had to start wearing body cams along with everybody else at the department. And honestly, I don't think it's a horrible concept, really. I mean,
I
there's
think that's
so,
one of the biggest bottleneck that we see in most agencies. It
yeah,
always comes down to report writing and also reviewing the reports. So technical and admin reviews. I can totally see maybe the admin review
for
being done by
sure.
an AI bot.
An AI could totally do the admin review. I mean, if it's looking through a report, especially if it has a report template, and it's looking for that you followed the template, that all the information in there is correct, that it's accurate. I mean, it could scan your notes and compare that to your report and make sure all your measurements are correct and like all the information you transcribed over is accurate. It could look for spelling and grammatical errors. Like it could do all that stuff. It could make sure all of your forms are there, all your forms are fully completed. You wouldn't need a person to do that. Now, the technical part, I think a human would still need to do if they were going to see that you know, the results were accurate and all of that. but the administrative part for sure. And you think about how many supervisors we've heard that are
They
doing
barely read it.
all the tech reviews, all the admin reviews. If you could have something doing that for you, like how much of your own time it would free up to do that. Yeah, there's a going to be a lot of applications for it, I think, for the departments that are willing to bring it on board.
So, as we wrap this up, what do you think forensic professionals, and especially the leaders of forensic units, should be thinking about right now when it comes to AI and preparing to adapt AI in their workforce?
I think that very soon we're going to be hiring in people into our departments who regularly are using AI. They've used it for many years. They are used to using it on a daily basis to, assist them with whatever in their life. And they're going to expect to continue to be able to do that at work. And I know there are departments out there that absolutely forbid it. You're not allowed to use AI at all. So I think that's an interesting stand to take, especially knowing that some of these people use AI every single day, all the time, and you're going to absolutely refuse to allow them to do it. So then you're kind of opening the door for some policy breaking, right? Because they're probably still going to use it in on like their phone or something like that instead of just kind of adapting to the new technology that's out there. But I think departments could get very clear on what is appropriate use for it, what's acceptable use for it, and what's not acceptable use for it, and maybe start to write some policies on that kind of stuff to support their employees so that, these are the parameters around what AI can be used for and which AI tools are acceptable. And then I think, like we already talked about, really helping those employees feel confident in their own decision making so that they're using AI. They learn to use AI as a tool for their forensic work, not like the crutch that everything leans on, right? So they feel confident in their knowledge. They understand why they're doing what they're doing. They are making the decisions, and that is just helping support that.
I love that. I think those are two of the places that you should start with first is like what's a hard stop, what's non-negotiable, or what AI is acceptable at your workforce and what AI is not acceptable, what information they can use AI for and what they can't input into, an AI, as well as, like you said, maybe additional training, making sure people are confident in their decisions. And I think if you're embracing it, okay, I think a couple of things that you can do right now as well is, as Erin mentioned earlier, she's branching out into other departments that are already using AI in her agency. Because I feel like forensics is usually the last to kind of come around. We're usually behind the times. Our stuff's outdated and we're kind of neglected and like on our own little island. So no one really communicates with you. But branch out into other parts of your agency because I'm sure some people are already implementing AI, like she said with the communication center, that you can use. Your agency's already using it. Your unit can also be incorporating that into your things as well. I think that's also incredible. And also just take a look at your bottlenecks, your inefficiencies, and brainstorm with your staff. Like if you were to use something like AI in this process, how could we implement it? Would it be useful? And that sort of thing.
For sure. So, as we wrap up this conversation, here's the takeaway that we want to leave you with. AI isn't inherently a threat, but it isn't a solution by itself. Like every tool we've adopted in forensics, its impact depends on how well it's understood, how thoughtfully it's implemented, and how clearly its limitations are defined. Used responsibly, AI has the potential to support analysts, reduce repetitive workload, and help agencies work more sustainably. Used carelessly or without proper guardrails, it can introduce new risks, create courtroom challenges, and place analysts in uncomfortable positions where they're expected to defend tools they didn't choose or fully understand. That's why critical thinking matters more now than ever, why policy literacy isn't optional, and why leadership judgment becomes the bottleneck, not the technology itself. Whether you're an analyst, a trainer, or a supervisor, the goal isn't to fear AI or to blindly embrace it. The goal is to ask better questions, questions about validation, transparency, bias, and whether a tool actually supports the people doing their work or just adds pressure to do more with less. Because at the end of the day, technology should help us do better work, not just more work. Thanks for being part of this conversation and for thinking critically about where our field is headed. We'll see you in the next episode.
Thank you so much for being here and listening to Forensics Unfiltered. If you liked this episode, would you do us a favor and leave a review letting us know specifically what you liked about this topic? It will only take a minute, but it will really help us plan future episodes so we can bring you more topics that you want to listen to. We'll be sure to provide any links from today's episode in our show notes on our website. Head to www.gapscience.com. Until next time, stay safe out there.